Welcome in everyone to another Baldur's Gate 3 build video. I am Senpai Zaya. Thank you so much for being here today. So before we get started on this build I like to call the Angel of Death, I have a quick question for you. And really my question is simple. Does this look fun to you? Pretty cool, right? So without further ado, let's jump right into the build overview and see exactly what this build brings to the table. So for the build overview, this build is going to be a fun and thematic role-playing build that still packs quite the punch. Thanks to abilities like Divine Smite and Spirit Gardens, we're going to be able to output an insane amount of damage in combat, but on top of all that, we can do really cool things with a lot of like our high-level cleric spells, and we can like create like an undead army thanks to being an Oathbreaker Paladin and everything. So this build is super powerful, but it's also a ton of fun to play, and I think it's a really cool fun role-playing theme to play. Is like this fallen angel or like angel of death. It has like an undead army following them. So if that sounds all interesting to you, then let's jump right into the level guide. All right, so hopping into character customization, you do have a couple different good options here. In my personal opinion, I don't think that really when it comes down to it, if you're looking for min-maxing and just like power level, there's not a lot of options that are going to be really bad. You can go with whatever you want, and if you're more interested in that aspect, we don't have an Asimir race, unfortunately. I really wish we did, but we don't, which would be perfect for this build. So for me personally, I just go with the wood half elf, or you can just go with the half elf if you want. And the main reason why I do that is for the 5 extra feet of movement speed. Since we are melee frontliner, we do want to get into melee range as quickly as possible. This is going to help with that by giving you just a little bit extra movement speed, and because we do also have like passive auras and stuff, we're going to want to be able to maneuver around the battlefield. So I like taking that, but again, feel free to take whatever you want. There's still a lot of really good options. Now in terms of class, you are going to start with this build as a Paladin, and just as a quick reminder, we are going to go Paladin up to 3, and then we're going to go Cleric up to 9. I know it sounds weird, but it'll make sense as we get farther on in the build. So you're going to start with Paladin, and then this is going to be super important. You are going to go Oath of Devotion Paladin. You're not going to stay in Oath of Devotion Paladin because you are going to go Oathbreaker, but you will want to start with Oath of Devotion Paladin because it's the easiest way to break your oath really early in the game. When you meet the tieflings that have Lizelle captured, you can attack them and that will break your oath. So you can break it super early on in the game. So make sure you start Oath of Devotion if you want to break your oath really early. And then in terms of background, I like to take Acolyte for the Insight and Religion proficiencies, and well, it just fits the build. But again, feel free to mix and match as you see fit. And in terms of abilities, this is where it does get a little annoying and a little hard, and I will say there are a couple of caveats. So the thing about it is, for the first 3 levels of the game, we're going to be a Paladin, so normally you'd want to have like a high charisma, right? But the problem is that after that, we are going to be the rest of the levels in Cleric, and we're going to want to have a high wisdom. The problem is once you become an Oathbreaker, you actually cannot respec your character. You have to basically restore your oath in order to respec your character. So what I like doing, especially because Divine Smite doesn't require like your spellcasting ability modifier at all, is I like going like this. So this is what I would do for this build, since you can't respec. And again, you can mix and match these as you see fit. For this specifically, since you cannot respec, instead of getting this up to 17, I like to have the extra point, so that way we can get charisma up to 12. This is going to help early game, and I know it's going to kind of suck having your wisdom really high for the first 3 levels and not really being able to do too much with it aside from passing a couple skill checks. But again, since we cannot respec this character when we do break our oath, it's important to get the stats that we're going to use for the rest of the game as our starting stats. Otherwise, you will have an incredibly complicated process to make this work. So in terms of skills, I like athletics because, again, athletics helps you shove and helps you resist being shoved, and as well as you can also jump farther when you have a higher athletics. And then in terms of your second one, you can put it wherever you want: medicine, intimidation, or persuasion. I like persuasion. You can be the face of your party, but preferably you'd want to have someone who has a much higher charisma to be the face of your party. You're going to have a +1 thanks to being 12, so it's not going to be too bad, but again, it could be a lot better. But this is going to be what your starting stats are going to look like, and everything for your character customization. All right, so moving on to level 2. Now what I went and did was I already broke my oath. That way I can show you what it looks like as an oath breaker in terms of your personal game. By the time that you can break your oath with the tieflings that captured Lizelle, you should be either level 1 or level 2 depending on the actions that you took on the Nautiloid, so this should fit just fine. So level 2, we're going to get access to our divine smites, which is going to be a core part of this build. I will say with your divine smites, there's something that you should absolutely always do when you're playing a paladin, and that is to go open your spellbook and then go to your reactions tab and turn them all on, and then turn on ask for every single one of your divine smite actions. That way you don't have to specifically click divine smite and then do that. You can do any attack, and then it's going to ask you when you make that attack if you do want to use divine smite on that attack, which makes it so much better, and it's honestly how it should just function automatically, but it doesn't. So make sure you go ahead and do that. So moving on, fighting style. Now for this particular build, I like to wield a two-handed weapon in my hand, like a greatsword, for example. I can see I have this greatsword on my back right now, which is really good. You should get it from the commander if you can and if you know how, but I like to do that. And then if you want to go ahead and continue on with that theme, you can pick a great weapon of fighting, and this is going to just help make sure that you get to output as much damage as possible with your divine smites, if that's something you're looking to do, especially for min-maxing. But if not, and you do want to go more like sword and board, then you can either go defense or dueling. The choice is up to you. Defense is always really good if you don't know what you want to do, or you want to keep it more universal and might not go great weapon mastery when you get your first feat, then you can pick defense, and that's going to work out just fine because it's just going to give you a +1 bonus to your armor class. Prepared spells don't matter too much here because most of the time our spell slots are going to be used for divine smite, so really you can pick whatever you want here. Another thing to know is the special smites always take an action and a bonus action, and we are going to go War Domain Cleric as our primary class after our 3 levels in Paladin, and we're going to be getting our extra attack from using our bonus action. So you don't really want to use these smites in particular because it's going to take away your ability to make 2 attacks per turn, and you won't have that bonus action available. And the rest of these are going to be concentration, so for the early levels you can pick and choose whichever one you want. But once we get up to our cleric level where we get access to spirit guardians, that's the concentration spell that we're going to want to be concentrating on for basically every single fight, so that's something to know as well. So moving on to level 3, we of course are going to get our 3rd and final level in Paladin. You're going to get a couple cool features here. So one of the things you get to do is get to control undead. This is going to be very thematic for our Angel of Death build, and this is going to last until a long rest, which you basically just get to choose an undead and make them fight for you. Super useful. And then you have Dreadful Aspect, which is going to frighten all the enemies around you, which again is very thematic for our Angel of Death role-playing build, and it's a lot of fun to use. And then you're going to get some oath spells since you are Oathbreaker, which is going to be Hellish Rebuke and Inflict Wounds. Inflict Wounds we're not really going to use too much, but Hellish Rebuke is a nice reaction to have. And again, you're going to get another spell slot here, so just feel free to pick whatever you want. All right, so moving on to level 4, this is where we are going to switch over to Cleric, and then we're going to take Cleric for the rest of our levels. Now, in terms of subclass, you're going to go War Domain. It's absolutely necessary that you go War Domain here because of the fact that we get War Priest, which is going to allow us to make another attack using a bonus action and a War Priest charge on our turn, which is super nice because otherwise we won't be able to make more than 1 attack per turn, which means that you would ultimately be pretty weak, and you would have to take Paladin up to at least level 5 to be able to get extra attack, and then take Priest with like a different subclass to still have 2 attacks per turn and do whatever else you want. You can take Paladin up to level 5 or 6 if you want to, and then War Domain, and you can have 3 attacks per turn, which is again really powerful, and it's really good for min-maxing as well. But then you don't get access to as high level pre-spells and spell slots, which is really important for your divine smite. So I like doing it this way, but again, if you want to go like 6 and 6, for example, you can do it that way as well. In terms of cantrips, you can take whatever you want here, doesn't matter too much. The only one I'm really going to shout out is guidance. If you don't have a party member that has guidance, absolutely take guidance, because guidance is literally the best non-damaging cantrip in the game, so you should always have it because it's just a free +1 bonus to ability checks, +1 d4 bonus to ability checks, and that's always nice to have. In terms of your deity, I like to do Kelmvor for this one. You can pick whatever you want. All this really affects is your like dialogue options and stuff, but Kelmvor is the god that guides a dead to the appropriate plane, and then he also sends out people to destroy undead that have like escaped his judgment. So I think it kind of fits that Angel of Death theme pretty well. And then you are going to get some spells here. Now what I will say is The main spell that I will shout out here is going to be Guiding Bolt. It's going to be your main range damage option, so absolutely take Guiding Bolt, and then the rest of them aren't going to matter too much, because once again, most of your spell slots, if not all of them, are going to be used on Divine Smiting, so you can just pick whatever you want here. It doesn't matter at this point too much. If you want some utility and you want to take like Bless, for example, you can go ahead and do that. Inflict Wounds, we already have it, but that's with our Charisma, not with our Wisdom, so if you want that, you can take it, but again, it's usually just more powerful to Divine Smite something anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. And then the other one I'll shout out is Sanctuary. If you don't want to use your bonus action to make an extra attack, Sanctuary is a really good spell for being able to protect yourself or an ally, especially if you're getting like targeted or something, since you are in the front line, so that's nice to have in your back pocket as well. And then I do like to take Command, because it's not concentration first off, and you can make enemies like go prone or something and then gain advantage on them, and then just start Divine Smiting the crap out of them, which is again really nice. All right, so moving on to level 5, we are now a War Domain Cleric 2, and the most important thing that we get here, which is actually super huge for this build, is Guide Strike. What this is, use a Channel Divinity charge, and it's going to give you a +10 to your attack roll. So let's say that you roll a 10 and you need 15 to hit the enemy, then this pop-up will appear and it's like, hey, do you want to use Guide Strike so you can hit this enemy? And then you click yes, and then you Divine Smite the crap out of them. So the Guide Strike is really nice. At this point, I think you're only going to have one Channel Divinity charge, or maybe two, but what this allows you to do is, because we are going to be Divine Smiting, then this will give you basically a guarantee on one of your Divine Smites, which is super nice, especially because for me personally, I'm going Great Weapon Master, so we are going to get that -5 penalty. So this is going to help make sure that when we do go for like a big smite attack, that we're going to land that attack and absolutely decimate that enemy. So this is super nice, and it's a really cool combo that I really like about this build. Here you're going to get another spell slot, so once again, feel free to pick whatever you wish. Moving on to level 6, we are now a Cleric level 3, which means we get access to level 2 spells. The level 2 spells you're already going to get Spiritual Weapon, which is super huge, and we do use that in this build, so it's really nice that we get it as an always prepared spell. And then Magic Weapon, not really going to be using this. You can use it if you want, but again, not really going to be using it because it's concentration, and later on we're going to have a spell that we want to concentrate more on anyway. So in terms of the level 2 spells here that I personally like taking, is I like taking Aid, because Aid is always really good. You can give your whole party some extra temporary hit points, and it lasts until a long rest. Sorry, not temporary hit points. It increases their hit point maximum, which is better than just giving them temporary hit points. So it's gonna, and it does do it by level, so the higher levels you have, the more maximum HP increase that you do give to your party members, which is really nice. And then I like to take Warding Bond, because this is going to be able to protect an ally and give them resistance to all damage, give them a +1 to their armor and saving throws, which is super nice. And the only downside is you're going to take the damage that they are going to take, but again, their damage is halved anyway. So I like putting this on my other frontliner, and then us together, we're just going to be able to stay in the front lines and be absolute menaces and not die anytime soon. So those are the two that I recommend, but again, if you want to take something else, you can. Hold Person is pretty good, even though it's a concentration spell, but Hold Person is really nice to be able to like go in and guarantee like Divine Smiting, like huge insane damage potential. So if you want to do that, you can at this level, but just remember that once we get Spirit Guardians is what we're going to be concentrating on for like every single fight, so you probably don't want to take any other concentration spells for that reason. Now moving on to level 7, you're going to get another cantrip. You can take Thaumaturgy here if you want to be the party's face, even though you only have a +1 in your charisma. And again, you can't respec because you are an Oathbreaker. You can go Oath of Vengeance if you want to, just like as like a little side note, but for the theme of this build, I'm going Oathbreaker because of the thematics of like being like an Angel of Death. So if you do want to be the party's face, you can take Thaumaturgy. It's going to give you advantage on intimidation performance checks, which is always nice. If not, you can take whatever else you want here. It doesn't matter too much because you're not really going to be using them. And then you're going to get another spell slot. Once again, take whatever you want, not too big a deal. And then this is where we are going to get our feat. Now, for those of you who want to follow this build to a T, then you're going to go ahead and you're going to take Great Weapon Master. What this is going to do is it's going to give you a couple different things. So you're going to get Great Weapon Master bonus attack, which is whenever you land a critical hit or kill a target with a melee weapon attack, you can make another attack as a bonus action, which is nice with this build because of the fact that if we don't have a War Priest charge available, or if we want to save that War Priest charge and we do get a critical hit or kill a target, then we get to make another attack for free and we don't have to expend that War Priest charge, which is super nice. But the main reason why we're here is because we get a toggleable passive that's going to give us a flat 10 damage to our melee attacks, which is huge, especially when you're trying to nuke things with Divine Smite. And the downside to getting a flat +10 damage is you are going to take a -5 penalty to your attack rolls, but because we have Guide Strike, it really helps with that, and this won't be a factor too much because of the fact that we have Guide Strike, but it is something to pay attention to. If you do have an enemy with really high AC, then you might want to toggle this passive off for that attack against that target. And if you do not want to go the Great Weapon Master route, then what you can do is you can take an ability score improvement here. You can either bump your strength up to the next level, or if you really want to, you can bump like wisdom or constitution, but I would personally recommend strength because, again, our main thing is being like a melee attacker and just divine smiting things. So choice is up to you, but for me personally, because I do want to wield a great sword or like just like a big weapon in my hand and really just output as much damage as I can with a divine smite, especially because we're going to have spell slots all the way up to level 5. I think that having all of this on a level 5 smited enemy is going to do so much insane like nuke damage. Like you could just one-shot bosses with that. So this is what I'm going to do. But again, if you don't want to go Great Weapon Master, feel free to just take an ability score improvement. So moving on to level 8, this is huge because this is where we get access to our level 3 spells as a cleric, which means we get our Spirit Guardians, which is one of the core pieces of this build. So what this does is this is a concentration spell. It's going to give you an aura around you that's going to do damage to enemies, and that damage either going to be radiant or necrotic. For this build, you are going to pick radiant because in the equipment section we do have equipment that does give us buffs and debuff enemies when we do radiant damage. So it's super important that you have that, and that's part of the reason why it's core to this build, because this gives us a constant way to do radiant damage to literally all the enemies around us. It is so much damage, and it is so huge to have this, and it also halves their movement speed. So it's also nice because it makes it harder for enemies to escape from us. Now you also do get Destroy Undead, which is when you turn into a creature. It also takes 4 to 24 radiant damage, which is nice to have, and again, Angel of Death vibes. So it does fit that. In terms of the level 3 spells that you can take besides that, again, you don't want to take concentration spells because we have Spirit Guardians, and that's what we're going to want to be concentrating on. So I like to take Glyph of Warding for when we just need an AoE nuke option, or you can set up a couple cool traps with it. And then the next one I like to take is Revivify because it's a free revive. I mean, it takes a spell slot, but you don't have to have spell scrolls or anything, and this is just going to be able to revive someone. So it's always nice to have in your back pocket, and kind of fits like an Angel of Death theme, like choosing between life and death and being like, no, it's not your time yet, and resurrecting someone. I think is pretty cool. All right, so moving on to level 9, we're gonna get another Channel Divinity charge, and again, I don't know exactly how much we have at this point off the top of my head, but it's super nice because of the fact that like get our Guided Strike more, which means we're going to be able to guarantee huge divine smites more and more per combat, which is super nice. The other thing you're going to get is you're going to be able to use that plus 10 bonus to your attack roll. You're going to be able to give that to an ally if you wish, so that's also nice to have. All right, so then in terms of spells, again, you get access to another level, I think it's a level 4 spell slot now because we are a Paladin 3 and Cleric 6, and it goes off your total casting spellcaster ability, but we don't have access to level 4 spells yet. But that's going to be a nice little just divine smite that you can use with the level 4 spell slot. And again, feel free to take whatever you want for your extra spell, because once again, most of the time we're not really going to be using our spells. We only have a couple spells we're going to cast, and then we're just going to divine smite everything else. Moving on to level 10, we now have access to our level 4 spells, and the one that I like to take is going to be Guardian of Faith. There's a couple other options. Death Ward is pretty nice to have, in Banishment, but Banishment's concentration, so I don't take it. Guardian of Faith is just another way to output even more damage per round, because you can summon like this immobile turret that has an aura around it, and then it's going to sit there and do damage to enemies whenever they enter it's like aura or on its turn, because it does get like its own turn. You can't control or do anything. It's just going to hit them for like 20 damage, and then it's going to deal 20 damage to itself, but still it's just more damage output, and it's nice to have. So that's the one I would take, but you're probably not going to use it too much, because once again, you'd probably rather just be smiting with a level 4 spell slot anyway. Moving on to level 11, this is where we're going to get access to Divine Strike weapon. It's okay. This is like the replacement to clerics not getting extra attacks. So once per turn, you get to deal an additional 1d8 slashing damage when you hit something with like a melee weapon, which, I mean, it's nice, like it's extra damage. So it's going to be nice when we do go in for like our first Divine Smite of the turn, but it's not like game breaking or anything, but you know, we'll still take extra damage to have, so that's always nice. And then you get another level 4 spell slot, so feel free to pick whatever you want. We're going to get our second feat here. This is where I'm going to take an ability score improvement, and I'm going to bump my strength up to 18. However, because there are some equipment that can get your strength naturally up, this is where I'm going to shout out that if you didn't want to put all your points in the strength and you want to have a high charisma and a high wisdom, or maybe a high constitution, high wisdom instead, then you can wear that equipment instead and then focus on getting like your wisdom or your constitution up. But as a general guide for this, I would just bump my strength up to 18 for this particular build. especially because I don't want to force you guys to feel like you're shoehorned into using like a specific equipment. There's equipment that's really good for this that synergizes radiant damage, but again, you don't have to use that, and I don't want to shoehorn you into feeling like you have to have this one piece of equipment to make the build work. All right, final level, level 12. This is going to be super awesome because we get access to our level 5 spell slots. We get one level 5 spell slot, which is super nice, and we do get access to a couple level 5 spells, which are pretty strong. I think we get Flame Strike, right? Yeah, we get Flame Strike, which is a huge, nice AoE option. So if you want to use that, you can. It's 10 to 60 damage, so it's pretty good. And then you have Hold Monster. These are going to be the two always prepared for you. Hold Monster is also really nice. So depending on the boss fight that you're in, it might be worth Hold Monstering like the boss, for example, instead of using like that to try to get like damage out, and then you can just guarantee crit them with your Divine Smites anyway. And then there's a couple other level 5 spells that you can pick here, so feel free to pick whatever you want, but most of the time I would probably rather just recommend you just hit something with a level 5 Divine Smite instead. So that is the level guide from levels 1 to 12. Again, if you want to do it slightly differently, you can go Oath of Vengeance Paladin, and that works just fine. And if you want to go 6 and 6 and have access to extra attack naturally and make like 3 attacks per turn, but have lower level spell slots, you can do that as well. That's also really good. I wanted to build this more thematic first, so that's why I went the way that I did. But for min-maxing purposes, it might be better to go 6 and 6 with this build, just as a quick side note. So moving on to the equipment section, there are some really good equipment for this build. There are going to be two that I'm really going to talk about and shout out, and that's going to be the Luminous Armor and Luminous Gloves. Both of these have the same thing, which is they have a thing called Radiating Shockwave. Now what that does is when you do radiant damage to enemies, you're going to release like a burst of radiant energy, and that's going to apply a debuff called Radiating Orb to the enemies, and per stack of Radiating Orb, that's going to give the enemies a minus to hit. So it's like Spirit Guardians, for example, you're going to be able to apply this to all the enemies around you, which is going to make it even harder to hit you or your allies, and this is just going to be a super useful buff to have. Now besides that, there is a couple other really good options if you don't want to go with that. That's just like a good synergistic piece that I found for this build, so I have them popping up on the screen as a couple other different options that you do have, but those are the main ones that I really did want to talk about because they do fit so well with like the thematic of this build, but also just with the fact that we're mainly using Spirit Guardians and mainly doing radiant damage with this build anyway. So really quick to include in the build recap, I'm going to give you a brief rundown of how you should play combat. So on your first turn of combat, what you should do is you should be activating your Spirit Guardians, and then you should bonus action in your spiritual weapon. That's going to be your first round of combat. Now again, you can do that before the combat starts. If you are able to set up the encounter, you can activate both of those before the combat starts, and then you can just focus on Divine Smiting. But assuming that you do not get to set up like that, then that is what your first round of combat is going to be. Your second round of combat is you're going to fly into a group of enemies. Your Spirit Guardian is going to do a bunch of damage and apply its debuffs from the equipment that we talked about, and then you're going to start Divine Smiting everything. You're going to have like this holy sword that's also going to be able to make some damage, so you're going to output an insane amount of damage, destroy everything on the battlefield, and you're going to look super cool while doing it. All right, so I know what you're thinking. You're like, wait, didn't you fly in the beginning clip and like fly in and just nuke a bunch of enemies with Spirit Guardians and all that? Yes, I did. And since you've seen the level guide, you know that you do not get grant flight as a cleric, right? So how did I do that? Well, it should be pretty obvious, but I just have another party member that can cast flight on us, and that's what I'm going to recommend you do, is have another party member that's going to cast flight on you before combat, so that way you can truly become an angel of death and just fly around the battlefield and absolutely destroy all of your enemies with your passive or with your Divine Smites. But again, that's for the thematic of this build. If you want to be even more powerful and go for more min-maxing and care less about the thematics, then you can just have another party member cast haste on you instead, and then you're just going to go absolutely insane Divine Smiting literally everything and probably just one-shot an entire encounter. So you can do that as well. But that is my Angel of Death build. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy the video, then make sure to leave a like on this video. And on top of that, if you want to see more Baldur's Gate 3 build guides, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well as turn on the bell, so that way you never miss a video by me. I have a couple really cool builds already out, so you can check. There'll be a playlist in the description box down below. But that is all for me today, so I will see you all in the next one.